Hello to the Pine School. Did y'all go home or are you still here? So I guess in my time with you guys, I have really a very simple message. And my message is that you're the CEO of your own life. For you Pine School group, I think you should be the boss of your own life is the way I'll look at it. And what I figured out is that I have a few secrets that I figured out along the way. Are you interested in learning about my secrets? Yes? So if I have time, I have 9 of these secrets that I'll share with you. And the first one is one that we're going to do for all 17 minutes and 40 seconds that I have left. And that's about presentation style. And I want, it's not an assignment, but it's an opportunity to pay attention to maybe if I do things a little bit differently, and you can rate me on it or we can talk about it a little bit, but the first thing is on delivery. How do I speak to you and what do I talk about and how do I deliver it? The second thing is on storytelling and where you hear stories and are they relevant, are they the right amount of time? And the third thing is how I interact with the crowd. And I think that it's critical in my world. I've been selling, talking, interacting, and getting people to believe in me really as a Pied Piper in almost everything I've done since I was in high school. I was a shy kid in high school, and as I emerged and went to college, and Steve felt a little bit of that, but this is the kind of person that I've been. So my first thing that I'd like to share with you is a little placard that I have in my closet. It's a Woody Allen quote that's called 80% of success in life is showing up. I'm speaking to the choir right now because you're all here today, but one of the things I find is given the choice of whether to show up or not, most people don't show up. And I have this conversation with my wife. We're in the closet getting dressed on a Friday night, and she'll say, "Where are we going anyway?" And I'll be like, "Oh, we're going to this party." And she'll be like, "Do you really want to go?" And I'll have this moment where I'm like, I don't know. Next thing you know, we're watching 9 episodes of Law & Order in a row, and we're sitting there, and the TV has won the battle. Given a choice of going to a party or watching TV, which one do you choose? All right, well, a lot of you choose the TV, and the TV doesn't care whether it wins or not. What happens if you go to the party? So since we're in a high school and junior high audience here, you have good contact with your friends and you enjoy yourself. And the idea is that everything really happens at the party. And what you find out is the next day, what are people talking about? They're talking about the party. Did you go to the party? And like, no, I didn't go. I watched TV. And always afterwards, it feels lame. But in that moment, you make a decision, and it's a weak decision, not to show up. I'm a DJ. I've been a DJ pretty much all my life, about 32 years. And I get an opportunity to watch people stand at the edge of the dance floor. And they're not on the dance floor, they're at the edge of the dance floor. And you see them and they're moving and they got every move going and they're going like this. And as the DJ, I get to watch this happen. That is not good. That is not comfortable for me to watch him or for anybody else or her sometimes. But all you have to do is step 1 foot out onto the dance floor and you have complete permission to dance, well, within reason in any way that you want to. But it's still that concept of whether you show up or not. The second secret I'd like to share with you is something that I've kind of studied in myself. And it's the idea of coasting. If you coast, what way do you coast? I can't hear you. You coast down. And what's going on if you're coasting down? Are you growing? Are you expanding your life? And one of the things I found is this was exciting for me. Who's the first person that knows you're coasting if you are? Yeah, it's one of the few things that you can measure in a way that you can fix before anybody else knows. And one of the things I find, even in my day or in my week or in my month, I know when I'm coasting, and all I have to do is challenge myself and get back to what I'm doing or get back on the phone. One of the things I used to tell my salespeople is if you're not comfortable with your sale that you're about to make, call your mother, because your mother would love to hear from you, and you feel so good after you talk to your mother, some of you, that then after that you can make your hardest phone call. But this idea of coasting is something that, from my experience, who is the next person that finds out that you're coasting? Your spouse, your friends, your boss, people that you care about all around you. And what happens if they realize that you're coasting? Many times you're in a damage control situation. Your relationship is not going to go well. You're not going to be in a positive state. And so when I think about momentum, I think it's the opposite of coasting, and I think you really have to press yourself. My third thing that I want to share with you, and this is a big secret for me, is if you're nervous, you're in danger of learning something. Now, this is pretty straight ahead, really, if you think about it. But how many times in a week are you just coasting, you're not nervous at all, but then you have a presentation on Thursday, and starting like Tuesday, you got this knot in your stomach. Even me coming here, coming down to Florida to speak to all of you, I speak every single week. I was still figuring out on the plane as I was coming here, making sure that I had everything right. And I was nervous about it, so I was excited because I knew that I was going to learn in this process as well. My fourth one is fame. And I wrote a book called How to Land the Job of Your Life, and I think this is really a life experience. I talked to my dad a lot about the acronym FAME, and he said it's a little egotistical. And I said, if you can come up with something better, I'll use that. But for now, I'm going to use FAME, and it's F-A-M-E. And my feeling about almost everything that we do is half of it's about your attitude, but the other half is about some simple skills that I think you can apply. And the F of FAME is about thinking like a free agent. Now, for you students that are here, thinking like a free agent would mean you know that you're in 8th grade or you're in 11th grade. But what else are you doing rather than just go to class? You obviously need to go to class, but anything else you can do above that is what's going to define you as a student. Because the expectation is you get to the end of the year and you've gone through 8th grade or you've gone through 11th grade. But what else have you done? This is also very true with your family. When you get through at the end of the week, what have you done? But if you planned that trip and you all went out apple picking, that's what we do in New England. Do you go apple picking down here? Maybe not. Orange picking maybe. So, but do something, because at the end of the week, when someone says, how was the week? You'll say, at least we went apple picking. And I think in business, in our jobs, what I find, I had almost 7,000 employees at Monster. And when I looked at the employees, when I talked to them in the hiring process, I asked them, what are you going to do besides your job? And I would typically, in the interview process, ask them about their passions and interests. Because if I could get them excited and telling me about what they really loved, I thought I could probably translate a little of that into their job and working for me. So what can you do to make yourself stand out? That's the F of FAME. The A is train like an athlete. I had an opportunity to be an Olympic sponsor. And as part of my Olympic sponsorship at Monster, I got to hire somebody to be the director of that program. I looked at 500 resumes. I had 9 people come in. One guy stood out. His name was Jimmy Pedro. He came into the interview, he opened his folder, and there were 2 medals in his folder. About halfway through the interview, I was like clawing to talk about this, but I held back. I said, can I see those medals? And he said, sure, I thought you were never going to ask. He pulled the chair right up to my desk, and the two of us had a very intimate conversation as he shared these 2 medals. And he said, my experience with the Olympics has been an interesting one. I started out, I'm a judo fighter, and he's from Lowell, Massachusetts. And there aren't very many people in the United States that are actually worldwide competitive at judo. And he went to the Olympics, and he won the bronze medal. He went back 4 years later, and he competed for the gold medal, he said, and he won the bronze medal again. He went back 4 years later, and he came in 15th. And he was sitting here in my office saying, I have some unbelievable Olympic experience. I think I can bring that to your job. He said, I also want to win a gold medal for Monster.com. I'm like, yes, Jimmy Pedro, you're hired. All right? So first of all, the credibility of his hard work was very clear, but the goals he was setting for himself right there in the meeting with me were very impressive to me. He also said, I have to come to work at 4:30 in the morning, and I'm going to leave at 2:30 in the afternoon. And is that okay with you? I said, I don't think we're open. He said, your last programmers don't leave till about 4:30 in the morning, so that'll be okay. And so he worked. He said, I'll eat the most ungodly pile of food you've ever seen anybody eat at 10:30 in the morning, and you can watch. So I hired him. About 8 months into our program, it was 15 months until the Olympics, we were at a company meeting, about this amount of people, and there was a blue mat at the front of the room. And I said, what's that blue mat for? And he said, don't worry about it. We're going to do a little exhibition. And halfway through the meeting, he flipped me on that mat so hard that I couldn't breathe for almost 5 minutes, and I lay there on the mat. But my 800 employees were laughing hysterically and so proud of Jimmy Pedro, right? I went to the Olympics. I watched him fight. It was incredible. And guess what happened? He won the bronze medal. What I took away from that, he was so proud. is I took two very important things. One is he was so busy and he worked harder than anyone that I had ever met. So I made a mark that day for myself that I would have a little more Jimmy Pedro in me all the time. The other thing I realized is that he won the bronze medal, but he was so proud. He did the best that he could do, and he didn't look back for a second. In fact, he didn't look back for 16 years as he was going through this process and going through this training. So when I think about the train like an athlete, I want you to just think, could you work a little bit harder in school? Could you work a little bit harder in your jobs? The M, when I think about M, I think about preparing like a marketer. And I was trying to figure out the right way to do this. And I was talking on a Friday night, and I came up with this idea. When you go to a party and somebody says, "What's going on?" what do you typically say? I hear SSDD. Same stuff, different day. Do you hear this? You have anybody say to you, "What's going on?" They say, "Same stuff, different day," or something like that, right? And what happens after somebody says that? You drink like half of your drink, and you walk off to the next conversation, and you haven't had any value whatsoever. What if when someone came up to you and said, "What's going on?" and you said, "You know, my son got an A on his algebra test, and I didn't have anything to do with it. I flipped my kayak 360, and I'm still here to tell about it, and I'm in marriage counseling." What if you said that to someone at a party? What's the first thing they would do? They go, "Whoa, whoa, 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 way too much information," right? And so I look at this and say, okay, that's prepared to answer a question about you as a person. And when I think about what we are in our schoolwork or what we are in business, most of the time, if somebody says, "What's going on?" we say SSDD. We really don't have anything to offer because we're worried about what we might really say if we actually cared about our answer. So I'd like you to think about this when you're at a party. What could you say? It doesn't have to be the marriage counseling thing, although that one works great because everybody wants to talk about that, right? But what if you could just share a little bit about yourself more often? And what about in business? If somebody said, "What's going on at work?" you wouldn't just say, "Yeah, everything's good." Well, saying everything is good is the same thing as saying SSDD. You're not saying anything at all, and it stops the conversation. The last thing is the E of fame, and that's to engage like an entrepreneur. And you don't have to start companies, although I hope some of you will. But you have to engage like you are about to start a company. You have to have ideas, you have to have opinions, and you have to put yourself in the way of opportunity. When I think about how famous each of you could be and what's holding you back, I think there's some very simple things that you can do to put this together. Could we bring the lights up? Could I come off this stage? Would I be allowed to do that? I don't typically talk on a stage at all, especially when it's this dark. One of the difficulties is that I have to jump over plants to get down off this stage. But as a concept, I can't actually come toward you and have a real relationship. When I typically talk, I would talk at a podium for about 4 or 5 minutes. And I would spend the whole rest of the hour. You see all the film guys are like, "Oh my God, he's actually moving out of the screen. What are we going to do," right? But at this point, it's about the film guys and me actually working together to make sure that we get this done. And we've got some different angles, like this angle right here. Is that a student angle? Where is the student supposed to be on that camera? Right? When I look at this, I think about the opportunity to engage with the audience. So I want to ask, what do you think an entrepreneur is? What? Okay, a risk taker.
Someone willing to take an idea.
Somebody willing to take an idea and do something with it? A builder. Somebody what? Somebody who thinks outside the box. I never quite know what that is. What is that? You get the refrigerator box, you put it into your yard, and you jump in, and then you jump out. From a box perspective, I'm not sure, but this room is a box, and we're in the box thinking outside the box. That's important to say things where people know what it means. When I think about an entrepreneur, I think simply about this. My definition of an entrepreneur is when everybody around you thinks you're crazy, and you still think you have a good idea. And you act on it. All right? So when I think about stepping off this timer and saying goodbye to you guys, I wanted to just share a little bit about presentation with you. First of all, do you like it when somebody comes off the stage? Right? Do you see a PowerPoint presentation anywhere? What happened? I actually thought about making a PowerPoint slide. I've seen all different kinds of presentations today, but you know the kind of PowerPoint slide where you can't actually see the white or the blue of the slide any longer because there's so much type on it, right? And there's a tendency to read everything once you get it all up there like that. And one of the things I noticed, I used to have these massive PowerPoint presentations with video and with sound and all this stuff. And what I realized is it was permission to fall asleep, right? And everyone would be taking notes on their BlackBerry, right? And the reality was that I wasn't getting my point across. So I found as soon as I came to the crowd, in fact, if these cameras weren't here, I would actually pulse into the crowd. And as soon as you think I'm going to call on you, you're like, I'm like, don't call on me, please. I'll pay attention, right? But the reality is that we're building a relationship now that we couldn't build when the lights are out. And the camera guys are upset with me, but I think you can get a little bit of a sense of what's important in a presentation. The other thing is just about content. Did I tell some stories in this presentation? Do the stories, do they relate? Yes and no. You know, I have many more stories, and I can go on and on, right? But if you have real stories, one of the things I found is a joke teller memorizes a joke, it has a punchline, and that's it. If you're a good joke teller, you memorize a bunch of jokes. But if you're a storyteller, the story comes right out of you because you actually were in that story. What do you have to do to be a good storyteller? You have to do something. You have to do something because you actually had to go water ski behind a blimp that I've done. Or you have to actually go to China and your wife gets to go on the Great Wall and I had to make presentations all day and I never went on the Great Wall, right? Like, that's not right, right? You have stories because you engage in your life, and that's such a big part of my presentation. So I close out with some simple things. You got to be in it to win it. People ask me all the time, when should I know if I should be an entrepreneur? I said, if you know your subject, then take the leap. Later on, you'll call it the leap of faith. You will not call it that when you're taking the leap. It's scary as can be, but later on you're like, yeah, I took the leap of faith. I did it. It worked out great, right? And if it doesn't work out, you don't tell anybody anyway, right? But you should take the leap. And for many of you, you could be your own boss, which is where I started with this conversation. There is an expression, go big or go home. It's pretty new. I love this expression. I think if you're going to do it, you might as well go big. Another way to look at it is if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. So if you're going to do something, then do it great. Don't just do it halfway. Thank you for having me out today.